lost control. Like I would walk past the liquor cabinet in the house in the morning, and if nobody was around, I'd have a quick shot of whiskey or something and like shove it back in and hope nobody heard the liquor cabinet open and carry on with my day.
Spencer, lovely to see you again, my friend.
Great to see you too. You're in sunny Hoth, are you?
I am Hoth in Dublin, of course, where your wonderful wife Vogue grew up. So it's a place that you both know well, I suspect.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Very familiar with Hoth. She had a stint though in Portmarnock and Skerries, I believe, but she does claim to be from Hoth. We'll give it to her.
Yeah.
This will go down like hell to your Irish listeners, but to me, it's
Mm.
all quite similar. It's kind of like Chiswick, Battersea, Barnes, Chelsea. It's all the same, and then you've kind of got there appears to be far stronger opinions about the exact location of where you are in Ireland, but hey ho, Hoth it is, and we love Hoth. We're going to be there in a few weeks.
I think if you tell a Hoth person that they're the same as Skerries, you may have a row on your hands.
You're in
I
for all
think
kinds of bother. Yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah, they're very, very up themselves. Some of those Hoth people.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
there's a secret hippie in me, and I do like to keep these little decks of cards. And for fun, I just like to pull a card from time to time, and particularly before an interview, just to see if it's going to lead me down any particular path. And the card that I picked for you, that came out for you, was determination.
Fantastic.
And I think that anybody who is familiar with what you've been achieving and attempting to achieve over the last few years in particular, determination is the word that sums you up. I
Yeah.
heard you talking on your wonderful podcast, Untapped, with your pal Jake, and you kind of casually mentioned, yeah, I quitting during your last challenge of your 24-hour run never entered your head. You never actually thought of quitting. So where does this determination come from?
I think it's just about getting the job done, isn't it? I
Mm,
don't mind. I don't mind. Like failing is inevitable. Quitting and failing are not the same thing.
mm,
Like quitting when there's more to give is a shame, in my opinion. Quitting when it's the sensible thing to do is is a decision that you cross at the time. I think there's a lot of when you listen to stuff nowadays, it's kind of like, never give up, never quit. If you launch a business and it's unsuccessful and it makes sense to close the business, that is
mm,
that is failing, it's quitting, but it also makes sense. You can't always win, and your goals, particularly if you set yourself large goals, can't always be achieved. I think what I meant by quitting didn't enter my mind is I didn't, no niggles turned to injury, fortunately, throughout the 24 hours. If I broke my ankle, I'm not going to run through it. I would stop the race, I would quit. But
mm.
also going into that, I had a real mentality of no matter how rough this gets, this is 24 hours. It's just one day of my life, and I'm very unlikely to ever run for 24 hours again. And I knew that before going into this particular challenge. So it's kind of when I say quitting never crossed my mind, it's just the job wasn't done. And it's kind of
Mm.
you can rest. I didn't run continuously for 24 hours. The idea was to run as far as I could in 24 hours. I had to sit down, I had to take breaks. There was one point where I went hypothermic. So it was impossible to continue. I had to take a good half an hour inside to warm up again. Um, but yeah, I guess what I meant by that is that I never felt like chucking in the towel. There was one
Mm.
moment where I thought, Jesus, I might not get back out there. But that turned good again, thankfully. But these things are quite unpredictable if you're not fully prepared, which I wasn't in this instance.
Yeah. Let's take people through the journey then of your last challenge, if you don't mind. I know you've spoken about it a bit, but it's really fascinating for those of us who don't know it all in detail. So you decided that on a Monday that you were going to run for 24 hours and you did it on a Friday, which was unnecessary to say the least. It was
Yeah.
almost as if you were subconsciously chucking little roadblocks in your own way just to toughen it up a bit. You're going to go, "Do you know what? I'm not going to pamper myself with preparation here. I'm just going to go and do this."
I think so. Yeah, that's exactly right. And by the way, it's it was probably existing in my mind a little bit longer than the week,
Mm.
right? I decided on the Monday that I would do it on the Friday, but I'd been enamored by the idea of running for 24 hours for maybe, I don't know, a few months. I actually wasn't, I had no idea that 24-hour running was a thing. But it is a thing. There are teams of people who run for
Mm.
24 hours and all kinds of stuff. Lots of 24-hour running events. And I didn't know anything about this. And one day, I was on Strava, which is probably my preferred social media outlet, just because it's really positive and I really enjoy watching people progress, like running and stuff. I just really like it. I much prefer it to Instagram as an example. So you can actually
Mm.
find me scrolling through Strava, just like exploring people that I don't know type thing. And I came across this guy called Alexander. I think his name is Alexander. I'll mispronounce it, Sorovskin or something like that. And he is a 24-hour runner. He's a 100K runner, 100-mile runner. Um, and I saw this thing that he posted, and it was just completely modest. There was nothing to it. Wasn't making a big deal of it, nothing like that. I'd never come across him before. And I saw that he had run 100, over 100 miles. No, sorry. I saw that he'd run for 24 hours in his local neighborhood at an average pace of like 340 per kilometer. And I thought that has to be a mistake. Or he has to be on a bicycle or whatever, or a scooter or something. Like
Yeah.
it's a glitch. And I looked at the breakdown of the run and the pace per kilometer, and he was in fact running, and there wasn't any big obvious gaps or anything. You can tell by the way if it's not legit. If you just have a quick dig into the data. And it was legit, completely legit. The heart rate kind of, similar where it should be. And I just
Mm.
thought that is a remarkable feat of human endeavor. It later turns out that he is like the 24-hour world champion, that he has the 100K world champ time, world record, sorry, time. So but on all accounts, he's a prepared athlete for this style of event. But like, I'd never come across him, never come across that thing. And I thought, God, if he can do that, I wonder if I can run for 24 hours. Obviously, not at the same pace as him, but what an
Mm.
interesting thought to just start running and see how far you can get in a day.
Well, I
Uh,
love your comparisons, and it just shows, separates you from the rest of us. We might see, oh, I heard my friend did a 10K run. Maybe I'll try and emulate that. You go
yeah,
to straight to world champion. I
yeah.
go,
No, but
I'd like a bit
just
of that.
for the record, I'm certainly not competing with Alexander. But I was inspired by him to just lace up and go. And there's something about these adventures with a lack of preparation that I find almost more exhilarating and enthralling than if you are ready. So,
Mm.
not to take away from, last year, I think you're aware of this. Last year, I ran 30 marathons in 30 days through the desert and became a world
Mm.
record holder myself. And completely changed my life. Like really I kind of I knew no boundaries for a period. I was just so excited by what other adventures might be available, in life, and particularly coming from quite an alcoholic background. For me, it was a real journey of turning self-loathing and failure and pain and kind of. I've always had a nice life, but I wasn't very proud of myself. I felt like a bit of a loser, and all of a sudden I felt like a real winner, like the ability to kind of turn that around. And I was just like, this is a
Mm.
fucking great feeling. Like, I want more of this. Um, and the fact that I was so well prepared for that because there was so much riding on it, there was a lot of eyes on it, big social media campaign, big radio campaign, big partners that were kind of behind it.
Mm.
Um, the kind of reality of failing was far more grim than it would be had I just failed at the track, because you're expected to fail almost, and that adds this pressure. So, the only thing to do in a situation like that is just prepare, get ready for it, be ready,
Mm.
don't go and do 2 days and pull out, that'll stick with you for a long time. So just get ready and do it, and try and eliminate all the risk that you can. Try and be so prepared that it almost feels great, that the thing's a victory lap. You're so fit, you're so well prepared, you're so conditioned that like once you take the first few days, and the can I really do this away, you kind of know you can do it. And as a result, it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, but it was also um challenging, but not it wasn't this great big spiritual, war with myself where like, can I do it? Can't I do it? It was kind of like, I know I can do it. I just need to stay focused, and not get injured. But with, some of the more um, exciting experiences have maybe been when you're not so sure about the completion and where there are really big question marks, like the Marathon des Sables, the Amazon Ultra. These things I wasn't so ready for, and the whole thing
Mm.
was a big wild experience, and it just chucks haymakers at you, and you have to deal with it in real time. And that's where you learn a lot about yourself. And I learned a lot about myself in the desert, but we were like a really slick, well-oiled machine that, we would have had to have been almost unlucky to have been derailed, unlike the opposite, where you're kind of not prepared or you're not quite ready for
Yeah.
something. And so this 24-hour thing for me was just, I think had I gone out and done a series of 12-hour runs or a series of 18-hour runs and lost 10 kilos in preparation and really conditioned myself for a very long, potentially wouldn't have been as fun. I
Mm.
would have had it would have been well, easier because you would have been better prepared and it would have been less fun.
Was the track not really boring? That's the first thing that came to my mind was like, I hate road running because if I can see too far ahead of myself, then I get bored. But if I just know I'm running around the same bloody track over and over
Yeah.
again, I mean, I didn't even know how many laps it was. Like,
So,
was that a blessing or a curse?
well, in the same way that I love running in heat, but most people don't.
Mm,
So the Marathon des Sables for me is a blessing. Like I love the heat and I love the environment, but most people hate it, and it's a real hurdle for them. But for me, it feels like I much prefer that to the cold, or even like a normal day running in London. I'd choose to run in the desert if I could. Like I like that. Um, I also just love the track. I love the track. I'm not a particularly talented track runner, by the way, but I like the track. I like getting to the track. I like running laps of the track. And I knew that there would be like same as you. So just thinking about what you just said, I knew that if I set off at 5 p.m. and just ran around London randomly, I'm kind of familiar with London. I would sort of know where I am. Like it would feel like I'm not really chewing off much. Obviously, you would go a very long way, but like to your point, you'd enter Hyde Park and then you'd, head down and you'd be going super slow. And then, 45 minutes later, you'd come out the other side of Hyde Park and you'd just be like, fuck, I've only just gone through Hyde Park. So to be able to get lost on the track and
mm,
just completely ignore the amount of laps that you're doing. And to answer your question, if I was in the fast lane, so lane one, which I wasn't, of course, I was changing direction and going all over all 8 lanes. But it would have been over 400 laps of the track. So I ran almost exactly 4 marathons. So like a touch more than 4 marathons in the 24 hours. Um, and that's just by chance. So at the end, I had ran 171.3 kilometers, and I divided that by 42.2, and it came out as 4.002 or something. And I was just like,
yeah.
oh my God, that's so awesome. It's exactly four. Like it would have been really annoying if it was kind of 3.9 something. But the fact that it was bang on four, I was like, that's a nice little sign, that this has just been a nice, perfect ending to that. But yeah,
Mm.
no, to answer your question, of course the track was boring, but I focused on music a lot and just thought about my business a lot and thought about just I don't know, worky bits, family. The night was an interesting time. The night was very cold. It was 0 degrees. Again, not to sound like I'm not trying to sound cooler than I am, but like I packed a bag 20 minutes before going to the track. Briley, my friend and social media manager, went to co-op and said, like, what should I get? And I was like, get some bananas, get some nuts, whatever. Like we didn't have like a big strategy. I had 3 hoodies because I knew that they'd get wet and cold and I'd need to change hoodie. Vogue thankfully arrived in the morning, went and washed all the clothes that I'd worn because I'd burned through all of them, and brought them back, which was a godsend. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like that. There was that you wouldn't ordinarily have that. But literally, it was yeah, it was kind of boring. But time went much faster than I thought it would. There was a
Mm.
real worry at one point that it's like shit. I'm going to start running, and all of a sudden it'll be 10 p.m. and I'll have 8 hours until 6 a.m. And like 8.5 hours till the sun starts coming back up, and that's going to be a long old shit evening. But actually it was kind of all right. There was a bit of like felt like I was hallucinating a bit. I told you I went hypothermic, and kind of I suddenly realized I was like, oh my God, I've gone from being too hot to freezing cold,
Mm.
and
So
had,
this
had to
was
get
you were sweating through your hoodie.
yeah,
It then got so cold that you were essentially freezing from the inside out. You brought
yeah,
yourself inside and you end up lying on the floor in that hypothermic state. But I
yeah,
love that you were rescued by the unlikeliest of products that you
yes.
spied on the shelf.
I couldn't believe it. So I it was actually Briley again. So Briley was at this stage super worried, right? Briley is not I'm sure she won't mind me saying she's not a particularly adventurous person. Like her spending the night at the track is the most adventurous thing by her own admission that she's ever done, right? So, and she was saying, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done," and I was like, What? You just sat at the track. Anyway, and she slept, by the way, for 8 hours in the van. So she basically just like she just slept in a car for the night, right? And it's the hardest thing she's ever done. But I managed to bang on the window of the car on my way into the reception area when I was hypothermic because I thought there was half a chance I might need a bit of help, right? So I didn't want to be in
Mm,
there on my own, just in case it went pear-shaped. Being anyone who's ever felt early onset hypothermia will tell you that it can be quite worrying. I felt it a few times because I have an ice bath. And if you sit for 6 minutes in 0 degrees and then get out and you don't warm yourself up properly,
mm,
it'll get you. And you can solve the problem by heating yourself up, chucking on some warm clothes, getting in a sauna, jumping in a hot shower. These things will almost immediately reverse the effects of what's happening in your body. So, providing you're not in Antarctica or the middle of Hyde Park, you probably can sort it out before it becomes a serious problem.
mm.
But of course, Briley didn't know any of this, and I didn't know that this was going to happen. And so she was kind of stood over me, and every so often I'd open my eyes. I was lying on the floor going, which is my body trying to warm up, and I'd open my eyes, and Briley would just be stood there like this. Yeah, it's just kind of like,
Please don't let
no,
him die on my
yeah,
watch.
no, no. And Briley was just like, do I need to call an ambulance or what's happening? I was like, no, no, it's fine. I was like, it will pass. Just give it, 20 minutes. It will, my body will get warm again and I'll change clothes and it'll be fine. I didn't say it quite that easily. I was, and she literally, she said, do you want a cream of mushroom cup of soup? And I was like, oh my God, that sounds fucking lovely. Like, yeah, I'd love a cream and mushroom cup of soup with the little croutons. And Chris Taylor, who's my pal and very good buddy from who organized the 30 and 30, had
Mm,
just given me a bit of advice on my way to the track. He was like, at night, if you can drink soup, that'd be really helpful. 'Cause it's going to be cold. Soup will do a very good job of keeping your inner
mm.
kind of body warm. So I just remembered that, and I was like, yeah, yeah, cup of soup. So smashed two boiling hot cup of soups and was back out on track, mate. Good as new. Like honestly, it
Well,
was
when I heard you mention the mushroom cuppet soup, I immediately thought of my wife who hates mushrooms, and that thankfully you didn't. I mean, could you imagine being in that predicament? You find the soup, and it's the one flavor that you can't stand. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
do you do?
I know it's funny. I was a back when I used to eat really unhealthily, and obviously every so often I'll eat unhealthily. But I used to I'm not familiar with the cup of soup, but I used to love like mushroom Cornish pasties, and I always love mushrooms. Like I love mushrooms. So it was just yeah, it was a dream come true actually. These cup of soups. I then had like a few more the following day, kind of even when I didn't really
Mm.
need them. I developed a real taste for them.
There's definitely a brand partnership on the way there.
I was disappointed. I'm disappointed not to have been contacted by them already, to be honest.
Um, well, you got through it. There were foxes trying to eat your food stocks while you were running around the track as well. But you managed to fight them off. You know, when I hear you tell these stories, I'm just fascinated by the juxtaposition of, and I'm sure you are too, of that older version of you, the big
Yeah.
drinker, the partier, who seems, when you know, maybe do you look back and think that was just somebody with the same amount of energy, but just putting it in all the wrong places?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I don't really, I'm not a huge fan of the person that I used to be. But without that and the years of,
Mm,
abuse and whatever else, I kind of wouldn't have some of the views that I have today, I suppose. So it's quite difficult to hate that person, actually, if you look back at it. It's more of a lovable rogue figure, I suppose, but
mm,
quite stupid. Like I could have just could have behaved differently earlier on. I don't think I had to, abuse booze for, 12 years. I could have done it for maybe five,
mm.
you know?
Yeah.
So
What's your relationship to it now? And do you, when I just think of myself, it's alcohol is probably the one thing in my life where I have to be really wary of the brainwashing and wary of the how easy it is to sort of just drift back into old patterns. And I found myself, I was away skiing with my two boys last week, and you find in a different context, you see these kind of burly Austrians drinking a pint of Austrian beer at 10 o'clock in the morning on the slopes. And you think, how wonderfully traditional. Whereas if you see someone drinking a pint at 10 in the morning, it's like, how wonderfully alcoholic,
yeah,
but
yeah,
when it's presented in different contexts, I have to be very wary that I don't buy into it and I don't fall into that whole thing. And I still drink from time to time, but it's something I still have to be really careful around. What's your
yeah.
relationship with alcohol these days?
Pretty similar to you. I do drink alcohol every so often. I kind of usually regret it in the moment. Like I
Mm.
don't I don't I don't really look forward to it, and I don't love doing it. So I often ask myself the question, why do I do it at all? And
Yeah.
I think it's because I don't love the idea of just declaring something unavailable to me for the rest of my life. Like I
Mm.
don't know where I'm going to be. Like we're going, like for example, I didn't drink for the first 10 weeks of this year. I didn't really do that intentionally. I just didn't really like, I enjoyed the productivity. I enjoyed the clear mind. I enjoyed the training. Business was good. I just didn't see a reason to go and have a night out. Um, then I had a couple of drinks on a night out, and it was just like it was fine, whatever. It's kind of it's not some it doesn't it's not that demon on my back anymore that controls me. I had really lost control. Like I
Mm.
would walk past the liquor cabinet in the house in the morning, and if nobody was around, I'd have a quick shot of whiskey or something and like shove it back in and hope nobody heard the liquor cabinet open and carry on with my day. Like I was not a I was not I didn't have a normal relationship with alcohol. I had
Mm.
really lost control.
But in
I
a
feel
weird way, isn't that like super determined?
yeah.
It's you're applying all this determination, the same skills you have now, but just in this really sort of unhelpful way. You're like,
I
if I'm going to drink, I'm going to be the most amazing drinker there's ever been. If I'm
I
going to
was an
party, I'm going to party harder than everybody else.
Yeah, no, I was an alarmingly competitive drinker, to be honest. But like
Yeah.
that came from years and years of just, bad habits slowly becoming problems. I think,
Mm,
if I was to offer any advice to young people, and young people drink a lot less nowadays anyway, but like it obviously doesn't feel like a problem until it's all of a sudden a problem. Like it feels like fun and you're having a great time and you're drinking every day and you're just being social and you're just being a kid and you don't really have any responsibility, so why not? Um, but then, I guess as an older person, you see things and you feel things that really slow you down and get in the way of kind of, in my case, of who I wanted to become. When I first threw in the towel in a serious way, uh, no one loves a quitter, but I had to quit alcohol for a period at least, um, I asked my agent if she could connect me with this quite famous sober person because I knew that she knew him, and she put me in touch. And he said, you need to get yourself over to the Kilburn's men's meeting this evening. And I said, oh, I can't do this evening. I've got the kids and I have a call at that time, I just kind of, and he goes, well, like, are you serious about this or are you not serious about it? Like, you need to get yourself to the meeting. It doesn't matter. Get a babysitter, like, cancel your
Mm.
call. Like, this is important. Go to the meeting. And I was like, he's not going to take me seriously if I don't go to this fucking meeting, right? So I kind of like, I was like, okay, I have to go to the meeting. And in the meeting, like it was purposefully a very full-on meeting. And he knew that, right? Sending me to this thing. Like he
Mm.
knew that, my problems would be the least of, the people in this room. And there were people who were physically on heroin and crack and all kinds of stuff in the meeting. Like you could see it. And people were just, we all had to sit around this candle and share our problems. And I felt so out of place. And I was like, what the fuck am I going to say? Like, I drink too much and like, whatever. Like, these guys are literally look like they're dying. And I sat down next to this guy when I first arrived and he looked at me and he went, you look fucking all right. I went, thanks, mate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, I'm
This
like,
place does
yeah,
wonders for my
yeah,
confidence. Everyone's
exactly.
in
No.
bits.
And I think the point was so I did the meeting and I came out and everyone was in bits, but they're in deep trouble. They're
Mm.
very alcoholic, very addicted to substances, too. And I came out and I thought, what was the point really in me being there? So I called the guy again. I was like, listen, I did that meeting. I was like, dude, like, listen, when I said that I had a drinking problem, I don't feel like, I belong here. And he said, that is exactly the point. He was like, what you don't realize is that you're heading that way
Mm.
and you don't get it, right? So you think that you have problems and that the problems are probably fine and that you can lie about the problems and hide the problems and that you'll be fine. Or maybe you just won't drink for a little while and then you'll go back to it and it'll be fine. He's like, you're a few years away from being them. And losing your family and losing your kids and losing your wife and losing your house and losing your job and being fucked. You're not far from that. Like nobody is. Like anyone who has these problems is closer.
Mm.
Sorry to take a morbid turn on the thing, but I was quite like, that's a really interesting point, right? Because when it's too late, it's too late. Your wife leaves you, she takes the kids, then you go, oh, but I'll check. It's too late, you've messed it up. So I don't know.
Mm.
That was quite a big thing for me where I went, God, like I know I don't feel as bad as these guys, but maybe I was heading that way, and
Yeah. Well, it
it kind of
suggests, doesn't it, that it's a scale. That's a sliding scale, and
yeah,
maybe these guys were further down than you were at that point, but it's still
yeah,
the same. It's the
yeah,
same
yeah.
track. Yeah.
You're on that track for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of conscious of that. Also, like I feel like I have control of my drinking now. Like if I go out and I have a couple of glasses of wine, like do I feel like having three or four or five glasses of wine? Yeah, sure. Like I'm an alcoholic, so obviously, like I'm not just gonna have two glasses of wine and come home and be like, let's watch White Lotus. Like I want to have a drink. But it's kind of, but I'm aware of that as well. So I'm very very conscious of it. I'm not frightened of it at all. I don't feel like if I have a couple of bottles of wine, I'm going to descend into vanishing for 2 weeks and no one's going to know where I am. Like, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like it's a problem in my life anymore, but mostly because I have control of it and I'm conscious of it.
Let's look ahead to your craziest of challenges. And this, I want to know Vogue's opinion on this because this is, by your own admittance, the most dangerous challenge that you've taken on. This is your 7 Ironman equivalent triathlons on 7 continents,
Yeah.
which is a pretty unbelievable goal. And you're going to do it quicker than uh, anybody else as well, so that you'll make yourself hopefully another world record holder. Um, Where's your head at with this in terms of the danger levels? Or do you think about that stuff? Or do you have these discussions with Vogue? Are things ramping up and getting a bit more serious?
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes have doubts about this one. And that's pretty unusual for me. So sometimes I'll
Mm.
wake up and I'll go, fuck me, that Antarctic swim is going to be a big problem. So for those listeners that don't know what an Ironman is, or an Ironman equivalent triathlon, or whatever you very eloquently called it, because Ironman is a brand, of course. God knows why they wouldn't want the promo, but there we go. It's a 3.8 kilometer swim, followed by a 180 kilometer cycle, followed by a 42.2 kilometer run, which is a full marathon. Um, on all accounts, it's widely considered for kind of, should we say, ordinary people to be, one of the hardest things to achieve in endurance sports, I
Mm.
suppose. So I mean, I'm sure there's harder things to do in the world. And if you're a professional athlete, each to their own. But for kind of Joe Public like me, an Ironman is considered to be, a big fat triathlon, very difficult to do, takes, between, shall we say, for somebody like me, between 11 and 15 hours, right? Depending on how the territory and just how tired I will be. Like these will probably take between 12 and 15, 16 hours each. I don't know yet. I've actually never done an Ironman before, so I don't have a clue. Um, but it's continuous sport. So like literally, if you're doing one Ironman and you do it in 12 hours, as I understand it, you've done pretty
Mm.
well. Right. So like that's 12 hours of continuous exercise, swim, bike, run, boom, you're done. We're doing seven of those in quite quick succession. But the thing that is going to make it quite rough, in my opinion, is the travel. We're also traveling the world, so we're going to every continent. So I think if you were to travel the whole world in 23 days anyway, that would be quite tiring because you're going to spend a lot of time in airports, on planes. Um, we're not going to be in business class at all because there's a few of us flying and we're going to be on a budget, So like we're going to be sat bolt upright in the back of these planes for hours and hours and hours on end, right? So we're starting in Rio, then we're going to Miami, then across to London, then down into India, then into Australia, Perth, then across to Cape Town, and then down into Antarctica. So the thing that people need to realize, because I think, that there have been amazing people. So James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, did 101 Ironman in 101 days, which is it's just nothing short of insane. Like he had accidents. He broke his back at one point on
Mm.
that on Ironman 51, had 49 left. Like mad stuff. But I interviewed him the other day and he said like God, the travel is gonna like completely do you in. Like, when you travel long distance and you wake up the following morning and you're just like, oh, like, and you're just so like, so I'm gonna have that seven
Mm.
times as well, you would have thought. So yeah, it's gonna be quite the event. Trying to do it in under 4 weeks. I personally think we could do it in 23 days. That's my target within a target. But yeah, the Antarctica thing is worrying. I think there's a third world record in there as well, because there's only two people who have ever done an Ironman on Antarctica. And I think we could probably do it quicker than both of them. So it would be the fastest Ironman in Antarctica, plus the fastest person to ever achieve an Ironman on all seven continents. The current world record is 4 years. We're going to try and do that in 23 days.
Shaving a bit off that one.
Yeah, there's a fair buffer for that record, to be honest. We we
Yeah.
we we can go a
And
bit wrong.
and what are those domestic conversations then at home? Like how do you know, and maybe Vogue asks you this, but like how do you know that you're you're going from this is a challenge and I want to see my untapped potential and I want to see how far I can push myself into this is mildly reckless and I can't see the danger.
It's quite a good question, to be honest, and it's not something I regularly talk about with Vogue. Like I have these conversations with my mum probably more regularly because obviously we lost a brother to
Mm.
she lost a son and I lost my brother to Mount Everest. And I try and explain it to her in the sense that, if something goes wrong in Everest death zone, you are on your own. You are
Mm.
gonna die. There's no real way out of that. Like you have faulty oxygen. on Everest past a certain point, good luck, like
Mm,
or a storm comes and moves you slightly off course. You will not have the energy to get back on course. You will just sit there till you freeze to death. And that, so it's all a very
mm,
serious reality. This is different. This is, if I start going into cardiac arrest for whatever reason, I will have somebody with me, a team, somebody to stop me, somebody to lie me down, somebody to help me, a professional, that will never be too far away from a hospital. You wouldn't have thought anywhere aside from Antarctica. Antarctica is the kind of the dodgy one, like Rio, I think we're
mm,
fine, Miami fine, London fine. It's the rest of it is a big test of endurance. It's a test of the body holding up. It's a test of kind of being able to just continuously get back out there to do it, because it's going to be really rough. It's hard. It's not the same as just running a marathon every day, which is also hard. But this is a lot harder than that. And
mm,
actually, the time off probably isn't that helpful. And let the time off probably isn't that helpful, but also having to fly 10 hours in that time off. So we're going to try and finish the run as close to the airport as possible so that we can get to an airport and get in the air. So that all the swelling that's going to take place in my body will happen on the flight and not on the ground, and then again on the flight. So we're going to try and limit it to just
mm.
one set of swelling. Um, so there's all kinds
You're
of
so
like,
kind to yourself.
yes, there's all
That's
kinds of
real self-love. You're just
yeah,
swelling your body once. That's
exactly. Well, just making sure that we don't do it
yeah,
twice.
yeah. Just you mentioned that wonderful, anyone who knows you will probably have seen that really powerful documentary you made about your brother, and it really touched me. And watching that, you can see the wonderful admiration you had for your older brother, as a younger child. Do you think that his adventure spirit is driving some of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was
Mm.
a very adventurous person. He was a big lover of life. So was my brother. My
Yeah.
brother James was a professional racing driver, highly competitive. Also loves sport and was very able when he was a bit younger. I'm sure
Mm.
he's still able now. He just doesn't do much of this stuff anymore. My dad was a professional race driver as well. My mum played tennis for a really high level in Zimbabwe. Like we're a sporty family, I guess.
Mm.
But like I think it's but yeah, that also there's a very beautiful thing that I learned about when I was filming a show for the BBC called Pilgrimage, and it's something called thin space, which I don't know if you've heard me mention before. Thin space is that kind of moment or place between heaven and earth, and it's something you might see when you're somewhere very beautiful, like if you're a sunset on a beach, or a gust of wind when you're thinking about somebody, or something, just whatever. You might
Mm.
be just somewhere special, right? You're looking Hoth Cliff Walk, and at the right time, at the right place, you might just look out and see a cloud that looks unusual or kind of spiritual in some way, and you feel like you're witnessing something. That's thin space. And for me, it kind of happens when I'm depleted, hungry, tired. It happens more often than not when I do these kind of events, and that just makes me feel very close to Mike. I don't do these events to feel close to Mike, but
Mm.
it's a bonus. Like when I'm in a bit of trouble, I tend to turn to him. I'm not a very religious person, so I don't. I have prayed to God when I really need something, but I'm pretty sure he knows what I'm up to. It's a one-sided relationship that, I kind of, I'm in trouble. Please, God, save me. And he's like, you never speak to me ordinarily. So why should I save you? So I've started speaking to Mike instead. And
Mm.
I feel strangely looked after. I had a really bad first day in Jordan. Marathon one of 30 was horrific. I really hurt my knee, like a niggle that I'd never felt before. Felt like it could potentially end the race. Like it was like quite hard to put pressure through my knee at one point, and I was like, "What is happening?" Like I'm so prepared, and it was swelling from the travel and the lack of sleep, and I didn't sleep the night before, so I had all this irritation in my body, and stress, I suppose, and pressure of kind of having to try and perform at this high level. And I guess a slight sense of imposter syndrome. Not that I've never said or thought that before this exact moment. Like maybe I didn't feel like I could do it or something like, I don't know, whatever. And I had this shit first day, really bad. And I got to the end just like I was battered by the end of this first marathon. Called my mum and she was like, "Oh God, like, are you all right?" And I was just like, "Yeah, like, I'm fine, I'm fine." And she was like, "You don't sound good, you know." And I was like, "Well,
Mm,
I've got 29 marathons left, and I feel like this was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Today was much harder than I thought it would be. I feel heavier. I don't feel good. I don't, I just don't feel good." And I prayed to Mike the following morning, and almost like the rest is history. I literally knelt down and and spoke to Mike, like a little private moment on my own. About 15 minutes later, this huge shooting star like soared through the sky. I was running with my physio Johnny, and we both saw it. And like I still to this day don't even know if it was a shooting star or like a satellite but bursting back through the Earth's atmosphere or something. But whatever it was wild. Like it filled the whole
mm,
sky. And I was like, fucking hell, like, well, that has to be Mike. Like, I've never seen anything like that in my whole life. And I was just like, I literally just like begged him to make this better for me. And then that happened. And regardless of if it had anything to do with Mike or not, I then had this sense of protection, this like, right, he's with me. Boom, let's fucking go. And then you're thumping music and you're off, and it's just like I feel protected by something. Whereas before you felt a bit naked and and exposed. But then I just had this blanket around me and I felt fantastic. And I guess that's what this will be like that as well,
mm,
in the time like, when I jump into the Antarctic Sea to swim 3.8K, which is going to take me about an hour and 20 minutes in 0 degrees. I imagine I'll be talking to Mike for the majority of that hour as well. Please don't let me get eaten by a leopard seal. Please, uh, please don't let me go too hypothermic. All this stuff, and I'll just need him to be with me, and I'll enjoy that, experience.
mm. There's a lot of pressure on poor Mike, who I
Yeah,
suspect is up there in the control room going,
yeah,
"Oh shit, the hypothermia! Oh God,
yeah.
the seals, the polar
Stop the
bears."
seal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Spencer, it's been an absolute joy. I'm conscious of your time. I'm
Oh,
very
damn it.
grateful that you've given me a lot of your time today. So I really wish you the best of luck. I love the fact that you found this. It's kind of clear to me that you do these things because, in a way, of what you're talking about, it's almost like the window into spirituality. You
Mm.
get to glimpse, and I love the idea of that. Did you call it thinner space?
Thin space, yeah.
Thin
I think
space, yeah.
spirituality is something that I never really paid attention to, of course, until I lo lost my brother. And it's
Mm,
regardless of how you see the world, it's just a nice thing to have and carry with you. These
mm,
ideas, this spiritual nature that your loved ones are there and they're proud of you and they're helping you in some way. Turning death into something because you can't reverse it. Turning death into fuel or something positive to push for, that keeps you on track. I think is a far nicer way of looking at it than kind of dwelling in the misery of having lost a sibling or the anger or the resentment, which I carried around for a long time with the Mike thing. So it's I think it's it's a beautiful way of looking at things that you can't change.
yeah. Perfectly put. Thank you so much for chatting to me on the Mindful podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And best of luck with all your exciting adventures.
You're the best, Dermot. See you in Hof.